Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Alicia here at Cosmic Gateway. This is the second episode in the series of the series that doesn't have a name. So, welcome back. Thank you for being here. I guess it's another round of cosmic conversations, and what I'm subtitling as um, cosmic ex exposure as an informal title. And I'm so delighted to have a very special friend of mine back. We did a series last year around this time, maybe a bit later, and we talked about the frequency jump. And I'm thinking maybe we were a little ahead of time because there's certainly some big frequency jumps going on as we record this. But
Mhm.
essentially, this is a series that has been inspired to bring the wild, the weird, the out of the ordinary, cosmic humanness, the raw, the vulnerability, and essentially bringing to light the things that people go through that no one really talks about and to give that a voice. So I've handcrafted specific people who I know can speak from various different ways of what I want to really bring to the forefront, which I think is going to be much more within the collective consciousness as from this moment moving forward. And also to not only give it a voice, but to talk about the awareness, how we can support it, how we can bring remedy and healing to it. So welcome back, my very special guest, Ahara. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, what a great introduction. I couldn't be happier to be sitting with you at the forefront of all of this coming out now. And it just feels like it's destined, the years in the making that you've been putting in planting the little seeds out there in the field. And now it's all just germinating. Yeah.
Yes, yes, it feels like that. It feels like that. Um, so yeah, just thank you. And I know that we're going to go into some raw and vulnerable pockets. So, just maybe as a trigger warning preemptively, like if you are a little bit sensitive
Mm.
to some um hard and heavy topics, like, just forewarning, we're going to go into some deep pockets. So make sure that your nervous system is regulated if you want to continue watching this. But we're also going to bring light to it too. And, I think it's really about, talking about the dark and the heavy, but also being able to bring the light into it through conversation and personal experience. So um I don't, there's so many places that we can go. And I think last year when we did our segment, we danced around a lot of topics, and now it's the time that it's like no dancing around anything. We're just going to jump all in. And I know that we have had a connection now for about a year or more, and I've learned a lot about your personal story. And I have a lot of admiration for you as a soul, as a human being, as both trying to come together in this realm, and what you've been through and witnessed, and how that's influenced your work. I mean, you're incredibly creative. I was going to say intuitive and creative at the same time. We could make a mashup there. Um, but also, I think what really brings that out is sometimes a very hard path. And I know that you've walked along, it's been a challenge for you. And so just honoring that raw humanness of what you've walked through to get to where you are today. And I'm sure that the best is yet to come, because I know that we're very incredibly passionate about children, and the safety of children and the cosmic children and all facets of the children, and where we're going as a species. So I don't know if you want to just dive right into parts of your personal story. I mean, growing up, I know you had your challenges that would be considered, can I say, quote unquote, mental health, like just to put a quote unquote label on it. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit, but I think that the new term that I am bringing in is the multi-dimensional trauma,
Mhm.
um, and how we can have all these. This is very topical at the moment. How we can have a relatively okay childhood, but we have all this trauma, and it doesn't kind of match in the degree of what's the word I'm looking for?
Mm.
It doesn't correlate.
Mm.
because there's other underlying things that perhaps pop up. And I know for you, and I don't want to take words out of your mouth, but things pop up later in life and we get these flashbacks and these memories. And um, so can you, I mean, where do you want to start and talking about your personal experience? Do you want to go back into what like childhood or adolescence was like? And
I think the first thing I would say it was a standout about my story is this stark contrast between having a privileged life with a loving family
yeah.
and having this horror that I experienced very young. And I feel like and certainly this is what I've discovered since excavating my story more and more over the years and learning about the psyche of children is under the age of 7, the brain and the kind of way we filter experiences is very different.
Mhm.
And so the ability to compartmentalize experiences and traumas is way more heightened under 7. So that was the age of my abuse or story, and that had a big bearing on how my life developed because I had compartmentalized it so well. And then living a privileged life with a loving family, going to private school, nothing to complain about
Mm.
on one level, and then having all of this massive baggage that led to me being quite suicidal at a very young age. And that, you termed it mental health or whatever, but, like a very strong kind of death wish, which I only discovered in my 40s now was an installation in my field, and not just associated with, going through horrific trauma. So,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I think a lot of things led me to this point now where I'm actually, and so many people like yourself who have helped me be able to articulate my story because I tried for years to be able to write it and I couldn't.
Mm.
And only this year, from meeting several people who were instrumental in actually being able to meet me in, oh, yeah, I've heard that before, or I understand, or I'm coming from similar circumstances where it was not this horrible pill to digest for them.
Yeah.
That was a complete game changer for me to be able to actually put my story in writing, and I knew that I had to do it.
Mm.
Um, and I had to do it succinctly without too much emotional charge and wording around it so that I could just get the facts out of my system and that I wasn't holding it anymore. And, I shared it with you and I was guided to share it with several other people. And ever since then, I can actually complete a whole chapter around this and now speak about it publicly here.
Yeah.
Whoa, but wasn't that a journey to get that out?
Yeah,
Mm.
and I can feel the enormity of that and how it brings everything into this moment and then whatever's beyond this, because just to get to that point of being able to speak it to a person, let alone to speak to an audience that will be received by, whoever needs to receive this information is a huge deal. And we still live in a society with so much stigma around not talking and it's
Oh,
taboo. But I think your story is so very specialized. And since meeting you, I've met a handful of people who carry a similar signature of these things that we'll go into more detail about. But because it's not like a run of the mill type childhood trauma story. There's so many components to it that work multidimensionally and like Earth and off planet. And, there's so many nuances that as you unpack it, I'm sure you would have gone, I'm nuts. Like, how, I can say that because I've been there, but like, where do I place this? And is this even real? Because my psyche, my mind doesn't have any context around this.
yeah.
Mm.
And also the time. It happened ostensibly in the 80s, early 80s, when I was 4 and 5. and that's a long time ago in terms of the world context now. So I don't, like there's nowhere to kind of place the memories around it. And certainly there's a lack of people coming forth in this particular kind of stream, I guess, of what you would call, I don't know, I've struggled with what the terminology should be around this type of trauma or abuse. Like, is it scientific experimentation? Is it torture trafficking? Is it a blend of the two? Certainly where I experienced it was in a facility. How I got there and who was running it, a child's mind and even my mind has no idea still. So I think the going mad part was not around, because I knew what my body experienced. It was more, how the fuck did this happen? How is this still happening in current time? Because we know it is. Like, those of us who are privy to these stories, we know it hasn't gone away. If anything, it's gone further underground. Hence why I am speaking about this, because, at what point does it end? It ends with disclosure.
Essentially.
So when people are able to piece together the how, including myself, how does this go on? And certainly living in a place like Alice Springs in the centre of Australia, where Pine Gap Military Base is, that play, living there has, I've been privy to all sorts of underground action, if you like, going on through, speaking to people, meeting people who work at the base, also my own remote viewing and experiences of what's happening underground. Is you just have to live in a place like that and you go, oh, like, this is real.
Yeah.
And I talk to people about that. Pine Gap Base that's in the centre of Australia in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and they're like, no, most Americans don't know, most Australians don't really know about it. It's still so covert. And so that is just a perfect example of how these things can remain hidden. And that base has been there, 40 years or so, at least. And so, yeah, people still don't know what's going on under their feet. And that's where most of the action is happening.
And I think you spoke so eloquently to the fact that these things that go on are so well hidden and covered and so far out of the everyday person psyche of what's possible. That's why they continue to go on. And then when it sort of catches up, it goes even more out there or under there. Like, and the level of technology becomes a lot more sophisticated than what it was. And that's what I found in a lot of sort of SSP testimonials or people who've been through trafficking or had some types of, as you said, there's a blend in your story that has components of different aspects. But the technology is much more sophisticated now than it was in the 80s and it was in the 70s. Like, I look at my experiences compared to someone like, let's say, Rebecca Rose, who, her experiences were in the 70s. And I look at the different generations and I think, whoa, like, it's advancing because most of the stuff is now more based on energy and consciousness than it is of the actual physical abductions, like what was happening in the 70s and 80s. So,
yeah. And I think, like, in terms of the psyche, trying to place our own stories or memories around something like this, we look to those connection points. And you, Rebecca, and certain other people out there speaking publicly who are talking about ritual style abuse or procedural abuse with government and ET involvement is what is kind of like a new avenue or form of trafficking that hasn't been spoken about, because we know that satanic ritual abuse is out there. There's all sorts of other forms of human trafficking that are out there, but this is like in another category again. And that's where I feel like, you're bringing light to this particular aspect of how is the government conspiring with ETs to do some of this really sophisticated, abuse of children and adults. And why? Like, what's behind that? That's a massive question, of course, but it's like what I experienced was not standard, blood rituals and, praying to Satan or conjuring spirits and that kind of thing. It wasn't like that. It was very clinical,
Mm-hmm.
but very specific and very procedural and repetitive and cold in a different way, but certainly no, blood and gore like a lot of the rituals we hear about
Mm-hmm.
through other stories. So where do you put that?
Mm-hmm.
And then it raises all these questions of where is it taking place? It's not in a forest.
Mm-hmm.
It's not in, so it's underground. These are facilities that don't appear to be visible to the public. So they must be underground or off world somewhere. So how do you even get to those places? Like all of these things, all these unanswered questions. And so I think we're in this time now where different stories are coming out where we can piece things together. And, you yourself being privy to so many stories under this theme
Mm-hmm.
can help us to do that.
Yeah, and that's the importance of people being empowered to get to a point in their journey where they have felt like they have healed enough and strong enough within themselves to share. There's power in the voice and sharing. And it's a liberation of sorts too, because it's coming from a place of not wanting to point fingers or being victimized. It's like, this happened, like you were saying, like you took the emotion out of it. This is what happened. I
Mm.
know that it's still going on. How can I raise awareness? How can we, as a community, as a collective, how can we start to bring this to an end and a wrap up? And I do believe, like, based off some of the information and other parts of this series, like, we are moving into liberating times. And I think that's part of the collective voice of now people, like yourself, just going, all right, yeah, it's time, let's talk.
Yeah.
And that's what brings it. So, um, I want to go back, like, there's a couple of questions, but first of all, like you talked about like it being in the underground. And look, when memories come back, we're always unpacking them and they're very
Mm.
fragmented and sometimes it's hard to put, but underground base having medical procedures. Do you have a sense of like how often this was happening? How, like, was it happening just at a certain age and did it stop at a certain age? Um, just maybe for people that
Mm.
might be watching that just kind of like sometimes when you hear truth and there's a correlation, it hits you in your body in ways you can't describe.
Mm.
So just any other details that you
Yeah.
have.
Well, first, a bit of context. So this happened outside of my family. We had babysitters that were in their care on and off for 2 years. And they, I believe, or I assume or infer, whatever you want to call it, have concluded that they were kind of like the front runners
Yeah.
of passing the children over. And when I say the children, I don't mean any children, because this is what is very clear to me, is that there are targeted children. They want children with certain abilities. Somehow they know how to choose them. And so I was taken away from their, or handed over by them and taken somewhere else, which was not a home. It was a facility because it was very big, and there were a lot of corridors and doorways that you can only assume what was going on behind those doors. And procedures were conducted which were very specific and repeated. So they weren't just done once. So I think, so there were specifically procedures done to my mouth and vagina internally in my womb and uterus and whatever else. It was like, you would assume it was some kind of tissue sampling, but I don't see how that could be true given the repetitive nature. Once you sample someone's tissue, you don't need to do it again. So I don't know what that was. But I do feel like that there was a sinister intent around immobilizing the body of a child in those two places is complete. It destroys your sense of power because you cannot scream, you cannot speak, and also you're actually immobilized in the two power centers, I guess, of the body, where you have your sense of personal empowerment. The sacral and the throat are linked, of course,
Yes,
and
very much.
that is so, like, I think that's what blows me away is it's so strategic. That's so targeted around how which parts of the body to do that to a child to immobilize their power for the rest of their life.
Mm,
Um, and so they can't quite access parts of themselves that is where their powerhouse sits, and so one of those is voice
mm,
and being able to speak your truth, and the other, the wound, the cervix, the whole part of the sacral area, especially in a female, is where you birth your creations. So the two parts, like, that get expressed into the world in terms of these high frequency children and what they come here to do gets hijacked. And so when you say, like, oh, tell your story, or find your voice and things like that, sometimes it, like, when you cut those energetic circuits in a child, they remain severed until this layer of you have to revisit, basically. That's
mm,
my sense of things,
mm,
because it's so deep and sinister and under the radar.
mm,
And so reclaiming your voice and speaking about these things, and the truth of what has happened, if you're lucky enough to remember, because of course that's their strategy as well, is to make sure you don't.
mm,
um and so I actually think it's a privilege to remember,
mm, mm,
in that sense, because you can reclaim those aspects of yourself, but you can also speak
mm,
to the specifics.
mm, mm,
And when you get specific about the types of procedures and the nature of it, even if you don't know the how, in terms of like how I got to the facility and who's doing all of this and why,
mm.
the actual procedures are very clear because my body remembers them.
I was about to say, yeah, the body, and that's part of this whole parallel, multi-dimensional, or closed memory is trauma, and our body is always going to remember what has happened, even if our mind doesn't. And that's such a powerful, powerful aspect. Wow, you've just triggered a whole heap of stuff as you've said that. So I just want to honor you and take a moment and thank you for
Mm.
reclaiming your voice and speaking that out loud, because I can feel the power of the ripple and I feel quite emotional
Mm.
around that. And ooh, I, for some reason, this is coming up, and like I've been acutely aware of when people go through satanic ritual abuse, and like the very specific ways in which people are abused, like and are sodomized. It's specific to fractalize, like to dissociate, to fractalize consciousness, to attach entities to. There's so many different fragments, but this, what you're speaking about, is targeting, as you said, the two power centers. And I've never thought about it as you've just put it. I was like, wow, like this is all so cleverly
Mm-hmm.
designed.
Yeah.
Um, and even I was thinking, even people who may remember or have recall, it would be so way out there. They would think, oh, that's just a dream, or that's just a, if they weren't in tune with their body and having this awareness, like having memories coming back would just be, I compartmentalize it because that's just way out there and I don't know what to do with it. So like put it in the corner. So I guess I just want to bring the conversation back to, you didn't have any awareness of this until later in life, right? So this was all kind of under the surface, dormant. You had suicidal suicide idealization. Sometimes it's hard. You had you had this kind of death wish, as you put it. And I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I've heard you say, I didn't think I was going to live until past a certain age. Like there was an expiration date and it was an achievement to live past a certain time. When can you shed a bit of light of what your experience was like when the memories did come back, like around your 40th,
Well,
or give or take?
I feel like the body memories started when I started menstruating when I was 12.
Oh yeah, of course it would. Wow. Okay.
And I remember when I started menstruating, I wanted to die instantly. And that feeling never left me.
Mm.
Um, I totally wanted to kill myself as a 12-year-old just from menstruating. So something was triggered by that.
Yeah.
It was like the worst possible punishment thing in the world. But now that I have the cognitive memories to fill in the gaps, of course, what was done to my womb and internally made me want to die. Like,
Yeah.
as a child, that's your only way out, right? So that's where the suicidal ideation and the death wish stuff comes from on that level.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
As an exit, a
it
way out.
was kind of like a triggered memory and then the emotional looping
Yeah.
reaction. Yeah.
Yeah. So it felt like this huge punishment to menstruate, first of all. But also, I had polycystic ovary, so I had cysts on my ovaries. I had endometriosis. I had bladder problems. I had all these physical problems when I was when I hit puberty.
Yeah. Okay.
Actually, I had stomach issues when I was younger than that, but basically the reproductive stuff started then. So all of that was signs, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's like when a child continually gets thrashed, like something's not right, or stuff with their bladder or whatever. It's like something's been tampered with there, on whatever level. And so it's like the medical profession, my parents, like it's hard to piece together things because there's no anchor point to link any issues to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there's like now we know, of course, in this day and age, it can be teachers, it can be underground stuff, it can be alien abduction, it can be anything. Yeah, so there were physical signs that I feel, now I'm trained in psychosomatics and the mind-body connection and how the body speaks, and so I profile bodies for a living, and no coincidence there. So I feel very passionate about helping people decode physical issues, especially when you it's not looking at one isolated issue. You look at the cluster of issues together and you go, what picture does this paint, especially if it's a child or a teenager? What is this saying? So there were those things, and then but the suicidal stuff never went away. It sort of, and so there was emotional distress always, to the point where my friends in school would say to me, did something happen to you? Like, have you been abused or what? Like, they couldn't make sense of it because I had good parents,
Yeah, everything on the surface was picture perfect, right?
Yeah, like I couldn't complain about my life. So where did this come from? And some teachers said it too, so there was no, like, it was just like this question mark. And then in my early 20s, I started to remember certain things about the babysitters, and it all sort of, flowed here and there ever since. And when I hit 40, that's when I had that moment of going, oh my God, like I remember on my 40th birthday just going, holy shit, I'm still alive. Like I felt like celebrating just for being alive. Like I wasn't supposed to make it to 40. And since then, I have done or seen a lot in my field and energetically and on different levels around how that could be, and how this installation of a death wish or death implant in my field was also put there to make a person self-destruct by a certain time. And now I can see why, because after 40 is when I was going to do my soul plan. of what I came here for. It's also strategic, Alisha. I know you know this, but I feel like my story, and especially telling it now, highlights how targeted this whole thing is, like from the types of procedures to which children they choose to the timing of, the death wish,
Mhm.
or when you put it all together, you go, far out. Humans couldn't come up with this. Not
Nope,
alone.
not
They've got to
alone. I
have,
was about to say
they've
that.
got
Not
to
alone.
they've got to have assistance. It's the same with the SRA stuff and the SSP. It's all the same. It all
Yeah.
has to involve off-world races to
Mm.
give it that potency and that intelligence.
Mm. Mhm.
And also the gain, there has to be an off-world gain by these races to bother,
Yeah. Yeah.
so, and if, after 40, here I am exposing them in a way and going, well, I'm going to blow the lid on a whole different avenue of trafficking with children. Of course, they don't want that.
Mm. Mhm.
So I'm putting a golden globe, actually, as I'm saying all of this, it's like, but it's timing too. Like it hasn't
Yeah.
been timing before now. It hasn't been safe enough to speak publicly. I really felt that. You felt that.
Mm.
And then today I was going, no, no, it's time.
Mm.
So it's safe enough to speak. And that goes for a lot of people out there who I feel will find their voice and find the avenues to speak because they will be asked.
And that's what I'm hearing and one of the inspirations for doing this right now is so many people have said it's safe enough to talk now. I'm
Mm.
feeling I've never felt the call so strong. I know what I need to do. It's terrifying as you know what, but it's we're in this crucial period now, which is potency for great change. And I got really emotional when you said about the death wish and the expiry date and because you were about to step into some great work. And oh, I don't know why that hit me so hard. Because you do great work, and it always goes hand in hand with things like TI, targeted individuals, and people who've gone through atrocities like that. They have incredible skills. They're not from this place,
Mm.
and they download. You have your creator type bodies. You help people in such profound ways, and you're highly intuitive in the way that you work. And do you see it from the higher vantage point of this from the soul level that do you see it that you kind of even though there's a targeting aspect that maybe you chose to come in and unravel it, like is there a higher perspective to your story that you are yet, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is there one? Have you?
Yeah, I do feel that this was very specifically chosen by my soul. And the only way that I could do what I'm going to do in terms of just whether you want to call it exposure or I don't know, mission or something, is to go on the inside basically to subject myself to exactly what is happening to other children en masse and humans. Otherwise, I would never believe it was happening. I would never believe it was possible. It would be too extreme, too evil, too off the charts. Even though I am a believer, I've always believed in, aliens and, fringe stuff. I'm not a non-believer, but I still
But
would
this pushed the
struggle.
envelope for you, yeah.
Fuck yeah. This still would, if I hadn't experienced it for myself, I could barely comprehend that
Mm.
it was real. And that allows me to then comprehend things like satanic ritual abuse and the heinous things that happened there and in other parts, organ trafficking and the rest, right? And all the off world stuff. So it's allowed me to be able to include everything in this life experience that is part of it in truth, in the whole truth.
Mm.
And I do feel that that's an empowering place to be. However, I have undoubtedly had my own, what I guess you would term as a spiritual crisis of hatred towards God, towards creation, towards whoever subjected me to this, to whatever, all of that is part of it. I'm certainly not whitewashing it.
Mm,
It's fucking hard and to digest it. And I'm not saying it's the holy grail on the other side either, because I still struggle to expand myself enough to hold
mm,
everything that's going on in this realm and beyond that influences the state of humanity. I feel like I'm constantly expanding into that, and that probably won't stop. That's evolution, I guess. But I think there is a tendency to whitewash, or can be, around, oh, this was your soul plan, this was your spiritual journey, you've got a mission to do, and there's like, yes, and
mm. The humanness.
so, yes, and so much more to that statement.
Yeah.
So I have had to resolve that, and that's been very difficult
Mm,
to resolve my conflict with the universal creation, whatever you want to say, as to, why.
mm.
And why would I choose it anyway? Like, what for? Am I trying to be a hero here? Like, so it's kind of just, yeah, it's an unanswerable question, I think, but it's just something that's ongoing and you have to feel it.
Yeah, totally, totally.
I can feel a pivot coming.
Yes, I'm
Take
about to
me.
change lanes, but before we do you feel like this expiry date death wish, do you see interwoven strands to SSP in your story in some context? Because it's well known in the SSP realm of disclosure that most people aren't meant to remember. It's
Hmm.
designed that way, and that those that do remember often will commit suicide within the first
Hmm.
6 months of coming back or getting memories back.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's a similar thing, or is it different, or are there?
Oh, I think it's pretty similar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I definitely got to that point where the death wish had me in its grips, you
Mm,
know, um, because I was so close to dismantling that implant.
mm, mm. Yeah.
And it's not like it's been smooth sailing since then, but it certainly kind of peaked and then dissipated.
Mm,
Um, and now I can see it, of course. It took me 40 plus years to even see that it was a death implant in my field. And so it was like, it's like this constant beaming
I was going to say,
telling you something.
can you give description to it?
Um,
Can you paint us a picture?
yeah, I think, yeah. So it's kind of like, well, the implant itself is like a pulsing,
Mm,
like a, um, like pulsing frequency waves,
mm,
and it just never stops.
mm.
And so, but at certain, when you go through certain life experiences, it's going to be heightened. And so it would be this loop of like, if I wanted to get out of a situation, that death implant would go, cool, yeah, you've been here before,
Mm,
trigger.
mm.
So
Like,
that
would it come through as intrusive thoughts or emotional waves or both, would you say?
just I think it's both. It's wanting out is the
Yeah.
way I would describe it.
Hmm.
Like, get me out.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so, and very powerful, it's not to be underestimated. Like, I still go, how the fuck did I get through that? And I go, well, I've got amazing people in my life. I have an amazing family. I have, um, yeah, a lot to be grateful for. And I think that if I was in a bad situation, like say if I went down the avenue of drugs, or you know, got myself into a homeless situation or anything like that, I think I would have been in strife.
Yeah.
really bad, and so I have a lot of understanding for people who are targeted individuals and have these implants and can't get out of it.
Mm,
And then if they're in not a great lifestyle situation, far out, man.
yeah. You can see it's a
Lucky they're alive. Yeah, at all.
recipe for disaster. Yeah.
Totally. So I feel like it was kind of, I mean, to me, like angels saved me, or like I must have had someone looking over me.
Yeah.
Um,
I was going to say that, yeah, there is a divine element to a higher aspect of you that must have overseen you to make sure that you did survive and come out the other side. And
I think so, but I think it needs to be said that a lot of people don't make it, and a lot of those are amazing souls. And it just takes the wrong interaction with the wrong energy or the wrong situation or the wrong person to
mm,
tip that scale, and
mm,
they're gone.
mm,
And it may not be a suicide, it can be something else.
mm,
That's very real. People being taken out of the sim or whatever, this reality. So, yeah, being in a good situation, and it does come down to personal choice too. I'm not saying it doesn't, because like I certainly prayed a lot, but I'm not religious. But I would ask for help. Like I
yeah.
trusted, to a certain degree, trusted the universe would show me things, and it led me to you and to other amazing people who've been able to actually hear, digest my story, like I said, which has been the most influential part of all. Because for so many years I felt like I've been silenced, because I'm like, but people can't receive my story. I start to tell them,
Mm,
and they shut down.
mm. I was going to say, how much of a game changer, like, how much did that impact your healing of just having people around you? Is that like, do you feel like that is like the critical piece of healing in these things?
100%.
Or,
It is the one.
mm,
Yeah. Which is why people like you, who can hear any story and receive any story, are the ones really leading the charge here, because that's what people need, is
mm,
to be able to hear the way out shit that no one else wants to hear.
mm,
And not just listen to a story. There's a very big difference between someone listening to your story and someone who can hold your story and actually digest what it means for them,
mm-hmm,
in terms of why it's come into their movie. Why is that story been presented to them? There's always a reason.
mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Was it exactly your 40th birthday? Yeah, right. So there is definite, I don't think you categorize yourself in SSP terms, but there's definitely these very interesting facets of um, SSP markings that my correlation.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Because I
Well, I
find that
think
the SSP people, for some reason, the 40, well, it was for me and for other people, the 40th birthday packs a punch of like, oh.
yeah, yeah, but I also think there's something in psychological terms.
I was
They
going to
talk,
ask you, yeah, if you can
yeah,
speak
like
to
your
that.
psyche, certainly for me, my psyche had stabilized enough that I could start to process what happened.
Mm-hmm.
It took 40 years to stabilize enough to be able to process. Some people it's 50. Apparently, that's the most common age group for people to have suppressed memories come through, is actually around 50. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it was 40. So I'm only quoting what I've been told by other therapists. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. Usually there is a trigger. Often it seems to be a car accident or something.
Yeah.
But for me, it was a timing, like a date,
Mm-hmm.
like a timer went off.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of knew that when I turned 40, I was like, oh, ping, I made it to this age. So that means I'm kind of out of the red zone or the black zone
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
of being chased, because that's how I basically felt my whole life, is
Mm,
like I was out trying to outrun something. And it wasn't just outrunning in memory, it was outrunning what was in my field,
mm.
which had been installed and was always with me. So
Yeah,
I couldn't outrun it.
yeah, yeah. So we're looking at context of not just something that happened to you as a child, but something that there is emotional, energetic, physical,
Yeah.
and technological implications that continue until such time as you start to,
Yeah.
yeah, which
Yeah.
is huge, absolutely huge.
Yeah. And I really feel like the paths that are presented to people who are targeted or have this kind of trauma are basically suicide, drugs, homelessness, like more abuse as an adult, like really bad abuse, so
Mm,
it's it's a big deal to overcome
mm,
or choose another path, and you definitely don't do it alone. You've got to meet people who get it. And
mm,
that's the most powerful thing we can do for other humans right now is to get it,
mm.
get that this stuff happens.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Can I say something else about the mind stuff,
sure.
mind program?
Yeah, yeah,
It keeps coming to me around, because a lot of people know about MK Ultra and the SSP mind programming that happens.
yeah.
That's not what happened to me. It was body programming.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So even more sophisticated
Mm,
again,
mm,
which implies how to the humans know how to do this stuff. So they programmed, like I said, my
mm,
throat, my jaw, and my womb and vagina. So, but then they would put me into isolation rooms after the procedures where it was pitch black. There was no sound. There were no humans. There was nothing to be seen or heard. Nothing. I felt like I was floating in space. Um, and so that dissociated the body even further.
mm.
So you have the dissociation from the procedures, which are terrifying, probably more than painful. Yes, painful, but like
Yeah.
when you're immobilized, it's the immobilization and the helplessness that comes from not being awake during the procedures, but not being able to move.
Mhm,
So there's definitely a terror aspect that comes into it, and then a dissociation because a child will just be like, "I'm out,
mm, mhm.
see ya," and then put into isolation, which accentuates that dissociation even more, and then back into the procedure. So it was like it's it's hardcore
Mhm.
um, torture, but not in the way that we would think of in
Yeah.
satanic or medieval or any other forms of war torture. Here
Mm,
this is coming from another place and another level of knowing about how to disable someone's energetic system,
mm.
which is why you see so many people in society who are super gifted but super fucked up.
It just says it all, doesn't it? Yeah.
Like they're in jail
Mm,
or they're on drugs or they're in abusive relationships or they can't get off the streets or they're in these, and you just go, what? Like, but this person is amazing.
yes. Mm, mm,
And so, how does this happen? Well, I hope to bring light to that because this is super sophisticated torture and very um, has to be coming from another place.
mm, mhm.
So I think also, I also want to bring the other element to this, which I am grateful for, which is when you have your body and energetic field splintered like that as a child, it also gives you access to these amazing powers.
Mm, mm.
Like seriously,
Yeah.
because you suddenly open up to other realms that you would never be open to otherwise.
Mhm,
And so I sort of grew up with this awareness and that this reality was a lie. And I couldn't understand why people just thought this was it.
mm,
And there was so much more going on. And being able to access other realms is a benefit of this kind of
mm,
trauma. So I feel like now, having worked through so much of it, the dark side of it, I can access a lot more in
mm.
terms of those powers and access my soul plan and get on with it. And I really hope that my telling my story makes it more possible for other TIs and trauma victims out there to do the same, because there's a reason if you were targeted.
Mm. Yes. And that's what I always like to come back to is like, if all this stuff happened, why? Like, what power do you hold? What abilities do you hold? And let's work with the healing process to bring all that back in and, like, yeah, get aligned with the plan, so to speak.
Yeah, so to speak.
Oh, that's so you've kind of brought that into such a beautiful kind of almost wrap up point, but I still have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there'll be many questions after this. Um, I know we've covered a little bit, but like, what are some of the signs and symptoms that you could look for? I mean, you've touched on it, but could we rattle it off? And also, can we just touch on a little bit of like the body remembers and how to work with the any tips? So we're kind of like as we sort of what to look for and how to work with it, because body stuff's like huge right now. I mean, I literally in September thought I was dying. Thank
Yeah.
God I'm still here. No, I'm kidding. Well, it was extreme, but yeah, the body is processing out. The body holds the trauma, and that's our barometer. So, can you speak to signs and symptoms to look for if it's yourself or a loved one or someone close to you in
Um,
the spectrum way, and then we'll go ahead.
yeah. Well, I ended up sort of writing, I don't think I sent this to you, but I ended up writing a full page of all of the signs and symptoms that in hindsight, I was just like, these are all red flags, or one giant red flag when you put it all
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other story if I was to go into the details around it. But certainly to not ignore anything, number one, especially if it's repetitive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and people would say to me, especially when I trained in my 20s in psychosomatic therapy and I learned about the body mind connection, and people would say, well, talk to your body, and I'm like, I can't. I don't. There's no answer. So most people are that dissociated from their body, even if they haven't gone through this kind of trauma, they
I was
don't get
gonna
an answer.
I was gonna say as a collective, we are literally programmed to dissociate from our body. So yeah.
Yeah, and to dismiss and
Yeah.
go, oh, I don't know, I just got my tonsils out. I don't know, I just did it. And I'm like, uh, what weren't you speaking? Like, what did you, and when did you get your tonsils out? Like, when did it exacerbate to the point where you had to have a surgery? So the body's screaming at us all the time in in some cases, and we're not listening. So that would be number one. But if you can actually learn body interpretation. I started out learning about Louise Hay and Annette Noontil and various other experts in interpreting body ailments when I was in my teens. So you can certainly learn that aspect or go to a medical intuitive. There's some amazing ones out there. Or someone like you who can see into someone's field and see the energetic system and what's going on. So if you can't talk to your body, that's not the end of the road.
Yeah.
Like, seek help, learn. So that's the number one thing I would say. And if you have a child who has repetitive issues going on, then don't ignore it. And it's not always useful or productive to talk to the child or ask the child questions. Sometimes you might need to seek an adult who can do that for you because they're removed from the child and the child will talk to them, or speak to an adult to help you to understand or someone who can talk to a seer, someone who has that ability to go into the energetics of a child's system and see more of what's going on. And now that this type of trauma has a reference point out there, it's all of a sudden it's an option. It's like, oh, maybe this happened to your child. And if you have a gifted child, and you will know if you do, because they stand out like dog's balls. They do. And if you have one of those, then and they've got issues going on, then don't ignore that. Seek help.
Mm.
If you're a parent who's going, I don't know what to do, find someone who specializes in that area or an expert or whatever who can either mentor you or work with your child or whatever. Don't just ignore it or go, I don't know what to do.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, you sent me a little picture last week. I'd have to pull it up.
Yeah.
I was going to get it all prepared. A
Are you going to
triangle.
bring it up?
A triangle. I don't actually have it to bring it up. I wish I did.
Yeah.
Which stated, so if you're visual, just a triangle, and in the center you wrote SSP, and then can you comment on the other,
Yeah.
the triangle?
So in one corner is targeted individuals.
Mm-hmm.
In another corner is trafficking.
Mm.
And another corner is pods, which is your domain, Alisha. I'll let you go into that or another interview. But
I've just come out of one, so that
yes,
if you
highly recommend.
have
Get on board with what pods means, off-world pods. So it's basically about releasing aspects of ourselves that perhaps are trapped in other dimensions. Very powerful indeed. But in the middle, the SSP that kind of ties everything together, the Secret Space program, which is now becoming a very broad umbrella term, broader than it ever was.
Mm-hmm.
Basically means that there are things happening in secret to humans that involve government and aliens conspiring together
Mm-hmm.
to keep humans trapped in whatever this is or whatever they're in.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's when we speak to these three cornerstones, it's just going to bring the disclosure exponentially out there.
Unravels it all. Yeah, it unravels it all. And then, we've got the off-world trafficking as well that ties into not just what you're talking about, and maybe that's another episode to go into.
Probably an episode
we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you. And just before we close up, and I know we probably covered this a little bit in the series that we did last year, but you work with body types, creator types. I know that you're now teaching that. Do you want to give a little bit of a I don't know if you feel like it, but I feel like I would like to ask you if you could just share a little bit about the creator types and the work that you currently do, as I know it's evolving. But even just a sample of, if you could share with the audience maybe one or two of my body types, just to give a sample explanation. It paints a bit of a picture rather than just saying I work with body types, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. Cool. So body profiling, I studied psychosomatic therapy, which is basically reading the bone structure and body shapes many years ago. And over the years, I noticed that there were patterns, and I created my own system of 13 body types called the creator types. And what that basically means is that you have your soul blueprint, which might incorporate your astrology, human design, you name it, whatever else is out there. And then you also choose your vehicle to execute that soul blueprint, which is your body blueprint. So that's the bone structure, the shape, how you put on weight, lose weight, your facial features. Like we were talking about your eyes before, Alisha. She's got the most cosmic eyes ever. That are pinging right now. And so all of these aspects go into, well, why did you choose this vehicle for your mission? Because everything you experience is through that physical body template. And are you driving a Ferrari? Are you driving a truck? Are you driving an old clapped out Toyota? Nothing wrong with that. My dad is. He's 95. He's an old clapped out Toyota, but he's still going. So we choose these different vehicles for a reason. And when you know why you chose or how to operate your vehicle, your soul mission or your soul plan can be taken to the next level. Not only that, you can actually very clearly see who else is going to complement your vehicle.
Yeah,
So
that's what
that
I love about
means
it.
what do you have in common and what do you have different? So you and I have lava in common. So there's lava body types, which have kind of a pinched waist and an hourglass figure, in women anyway. And so the volcano, the lava sits in the hips. That's intense heat, intense revolutionary seeds to bring to the surface. So there's a lot of deep intensity and fire and drive with lava people, and that's what you and I have in common. So lava people are rebels by nature. They do not conform, and they're always like, right, what are we doing to crack this membrane of what we think is real or what the status quo is, you know? So there's a lot of it, momentum to create a new landscape.
Mm.
So we definitely meet in the
Doesn't
middle
sound
there.
familiar at all.
Yeah. But then what Alisha has that I don't is ocean. So she also has this huge capacity to hold vast amounts of intelligence, if you like, but also fertile creation energy, because the ocean is its own ecosystem, has its whole own animal kingdom and of sea life. And so when you have ocean and lava together, and the ocean also sits in the hips, so ocean people also have shapely buttocks, generally speaking, because that's where they're very, very fertile, and they've got a lot of power to bring to the surface. Those waves of flow and emotion are really strong. So it's a lot of energy to hold, especially with lava as well. But it basically means huge capacity to create change and create something new, but you do it with flow and ease, like the ocean moves, you know, in its own current. Whereas I don't have water, so I'm far more dramatic. I've got whirlwind, and it's like, woo, let's just, you know, throw a few things out there and see what happens, you know. And so it's very complementary, in terms of those types working together. So that gives you a little glimpse anyway. I
Thank
could go
you. That
on
was
and on and on.
no, I thought that's a beautiful snapshot just because I know so many people since we did our series together were wanting to reach out to like connect with you to have a profile done, but they weren't sure because they wanted to know a little bit more. So I thought that just
Oh,
put
yeah.
that out there, and I thought, you know, I think the work that you do is quite revolutionary and it should be, yeah, shared around. So thank you for that. But here we are, like just thank you for
Mm.
everything, you know, for what, you know, what you've been through, what you've processed, what you've brought to the world, where you're standing right now, and thank you for being here and sharing it and speaking it. So
And thank you, darling. I so appreciate our friendship and your amazing insights and love that you bring to everything that you do. You're amazing too. So
yeah.
yeah, it's been feel like I've known you forever anyway, but yeah, it's been quite an exploration in meeting Alisha Brachet, I must say. My God. Yeah, talk about an activation. People say I'm an activation, but you certainly meet me halfway there. Yeah.
I didn't realize I was so much of a fringe dweller until I met you. I just thought it was normal.
No.
But thank you. I appreciate that. That's lovely. Well, thank you, Ahara. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I kind of forgot that we were recording most of this. It just feels like that. But it's good. We've brought like an offline conversation to online to share. So I hope that it hasn't, no, I don't even want to say that. I hope that this has brought light to something. I hope that the people who need to find this are watching this. If you want to connect with myself or Ahara, all the details will be in the description box below. I'm sure that there'll be more. If there is any questions, we can come back and do a second take if that's if that aligns. And just thank you everyone for being your voice, your energy towards this huge unraveling that we're walking into and what's going to bring a better world for everyone. So, much love until next time. We'll
Thank
connect
you.
with you soon. Bye.